sure everything's set up okay. Make sure I don't get feedback. Voice seems to be working. Set up okay. Make sure I don't get feedback. Alright, hopefully this works. I'm going to have to speak up a little bit to make sure my mic picks me up, but I think it should work just fine. Alright, so alright, so let's get started. So what we're going to be walking through today is Steve Houston's method for figure drawing, and it is going to be basically a regurgitation of what I've studied in his notes. This is his lesson. This is basically my notes from his lecture on the New Masters Academy series videos, which you can watch through the New Masters Academy website if you're subscribed to it. I believe they have a 7-day trial now if you want to check it out. Yeah, Steve Houston is a really awesome painter and figure drawing instructor, and we're going to be walking through his method of how to approach and think about figures, and we're going to be using that and applying it to how we draw over photographs of figures, and how we do our figure model, like life drawing studies in general. So the basic core concept that we want to focus on is this: art is an idea. It's an expression of an idea. We are trying to get ideas on a page. It's like when we draw a figure, we are not drawing the figure. We are drawing an idea of the figure. That means we're not really copying what we're seeing. We're trying to interpret it in some way. So the two big things that we are going to focus on right now is structure and gesture. Structure is 3D forms and mass and volume. That would be like if you had a tree, the structure would be the trunk, the roots, the branches and the leaves and so on. It's the parts, basically. Structure is the parts. Structure is 3D forms of mass and volume, which includes things like forms, mass, and volume. Gesture, meanwhile, gesture is the secret sauce that connects those forms together. Everything you draw has gesture underlying it, and gesture is how forms are connected, how 3D forms are connected together. Gesture is also composition, because of how things composition doesn't just mean like how things are composed on a page. Composition means how a figure itself is composed, like what composes its parts and how it flows together. The thing, basically, like the gesture becomes the connective, like kind of like tissue between the 3D forms. It's the relationships between the parts to the composed whole. So like if you look at like a tree in nature, for example, like the way that it's grown and stuff, it isn't just like a cubic mass or of composed parts. Like it grew organically and has like a flow to it. And that's the same way with human figures. It's the same way with inorganic things that flow, like fire and smoke. There's a surprising amount of machinery that has a feeling of gesture to it. There are things that are inorganic which don't have as much gesture, but those would be like really, really like abstract shapes. We're after stuff that combines gesture and structure, though. So one of the big things is that we're going to be emphasizing here in the way we do the classes is the TD two-step, which is the teaching and drawing two-step. It's not enough for me to teach things. You have to draw also. So So in addition to what we do today, we're also going to jump right into drawing. I'll show you what you are supposed to do, and then I want you to do it. And we're going to do it. And it's going to be on you to find the reference to do it. And I'll give you some tools to dig around for it, but and I'll maybe even walk through the process of finding some reference and showing how I find reference. And then you can go off on your own and do it, and we might hang out further to ask further questions while we practice together. Anyway, another key concept to think about is the whole drawing will fall apart if the gesture is not working. Like the gesture gesture gives everything its underlying oomph. So it's really, really important that you get the gesture right. And another important concept is the balance between structure and gesture. Because if you go too far into gesture, everything gets loosey-goosey and you don't have any sense of three-dimensionality or of course, structure to the stuff. If you go too far into structure, everything gets really stiff. But if you balance the two, you can produce really lively drawings that have a great sense of three-dimensionality to them. And that's the illusion you're trying to go for. You're trying to go for an illusion of three-dimensional life in the drawings that you make. Anyway, so another key concept that we want to keep in mind is the concept of process or procedure. Process gives you consistency and procedure to walk back into to fix errors. Process over time and mileage, repeating it, can transform into style. Like, don't concern yourself early on with quote-unquote style. Style comes out after putting a lot of effort into practicing a process over and over again, so that it becomes second nature. In our case, like here's an example of process. Although this isn't strictly how it follows, but like an example is like you start drawing with gesture, and when you get the gesture pretty well done, you move on to structure, or structure and form. Then when you get the structure pretty well defined, you move on to anatomy. Then when you get the anatomy pretty well defined and described, you move on to lighting. Then when you get the lighting and like the shadow patterns and stuff mapped out, you move on to rendering, which of course is like the polishing and the tweaking and stuff, like adding the little highlights and the little bits and stuff to really give it the detail that it needs. That's like an example of a procedure. Like there's other procedures that might break down the steps further or be specific to a particular type of approach or something, but this is an example of like a procedure. So, what is structure? Structure is the parts in space, basically. Structure is basically like 3D forms in space, like the difference between 2D and 3D. Like this is a 3D circle right here, ellipse right here. You can see the ellipse around it describes a circular shape, but this circular shape does not describe anything in 3D. This cylinder right here, with the ends that it has right there, and then the extra curves that I drew over the top of it here, describes a 3D shape. This box here also describes a 3D shape of structure. Also, and in addition to this stuff right here, you also can tell like which directions it's facing, because it has different planes on it. One of the key concepts to keep in mind about structure is movement over the form. Like this is movement over the form right here. This is movement in 2D right there. This is movement over the form right here. This is also movement over the form, these angles right here on this cube. You're basically, when you approach structure, you should approach it like you're trying to sculpt on the page using illusion. And your building blocks are the pieces of your structure. And these basic shapes, like, these are some of the basic shapes. There's also like pyramids, for example, as another shape that you'd have, and maybe like ovoids, which are like a stretched out kind of spheres that would just be like, here, I'll give some examples actually real quick. So here's some of your basic 3D shapes. So here's a sphere, but this isn't really a sphere yet. It's just more like a circle. But you add this to it, maybe an indication of which side is facing us, and now it's a sphere. This kind of like, and then there's this kind of oblong egg shape that I'm going to make here, which is basically kind of a stretched out sphere. It too, you need something to describe what side is facing us. But if you notice, this one and this one both differ from each other in that it's easier to tell which direction this one is leaning than that one, even without this, because of this. Like, I mean, if you were to turn this around and stuff, you wouldn't be able to tell which direction it's facing unless I made that little line there. But this you can, because it shrinks when it turns away from the camera. So you got your sphere, your egg shape, your cube, your cylinder. Oops. No, it's not selecting racer for some reason for me. Okay, here we go. I'm just making a quick note for myself to remember which one of these to go over before I move on. And pyramid. So the cube, obviously, start with kind of a square shape. I'm doing a little bit kind of perspective here. But yeah, I mean, the cube is basically going to be like the same size on all sides. This is kind of a really awkward warped cube right here. But you can also stretch out the cube however you need it to different sizes and shapes, and you can always tell which directions it's facing. But a thing to keep in mind is the lines on the cube, like this, are always going to be parallel with each other on the side they're facing. And they can be influenced by perspective, but they're still essentially parallel to each other within the rules of perspective. Like here's a couple lines going towards the vanishing point on perspective. Here's my cube down here. Got a bunch of parallel lines in perspective, like that. So the cylinder right here, well, you can. The best way to draw a cylinder is to start with the longest axis, like that. Draw another longest axis in parallel to it, and then once you, if you notice, like these two parallel lines right here, that's kind of getting the start of like a 2D thing, and then you add this. To both ends of it, and that becomes a 3D shape. And then, as with the cube, you basically are making parallel ellipses curving over the form. And if you wanted to describe which directions it's facing, you'd find some kind of a center line on it for what direction it's facing, like that. Like, let's say this is like a really, really long torso. Here are the nipples right here. But this is like the center line right there. And then notice I'm having it angle along underneath here on the ellipse on the end there. So that's like a fully 3D shape, basically. Badly drawn, but it is a 3D shape essentially. And then of course there's pyramid, which is kind of like, pyramids are kind of very similar to cubes, but I think it's good to include them because the wedges that you can use with them make them very useful. Pyramids can be 3-sided or four-sided, whatever, but it essentially is like one of the planes of a cube, but like this is actually a really messed up pyramid here. Do a better one. Like right here, let's do one right here where there's not too much perspective on it. So what I've done here is I created a square, then I crisscrossed across it, found the center point, drew up from the center point. Then like I could make this at any size, like I could make it here, and then I have a really short pyramid. Yeah, this is just another building block that you can use. The main ones you're going to be using when you're figure drawing, I mean you will occasionally use this, but the main ones you're going to be using when you're figure drawing will be these friends right here. And of course variants like the ovoid shape. Primarily one of the biggest things you'll be using the most though is the tubes of the cylinders, like so. Like that could be like a bicep or a forearm or something. Anyway, getting back to my notes. You're supposed to draw an idea, not the thing. You are not drawing a head or a hand. You are drawing an idea of it in a simple structure. And then I drew some examples here. Like here is a really hand that's just a cube, and then I've got like some kind of wire gesture lines here that I would start on for fingers or something. And then this head here that's like a really, really simple shape. It's loosely based on how Steve Houston likes to simplify his heads. Keep things simple. A forearm becomes a tube, hips become a cube, heads become an ovoid, for example. You want to keep things simple because drawing simple means you can draw quicker. You can redesign things easier, and you can animate it. By animate it, I don't literally mean animate, although you can use this for animation. I mean in that you can bring movement and life to it and repose it and move it and change it as you see fit. Like you can modify the pose and have it make sense. Anyway, so and the second point is you want to keep things simple, but yet characteristic enough to look like or imply the thing and relate to the rest. Like for example, like I drew some examples here. This looks like the forearm basically. Like kind of a tube shape here. But a forearm kind of is a tube shape that tapers into a wrist. And here's like would be the hand down at the end there. Steve Houston did an example of like this is like a kind of a doodle version of what he did in the demo that I watched. You want to strategize about using shapes that are recognizable and that have been kind of modified and bent to feel like the thing while remaining simple, basically. Anyway, here, let me toss that in there. Alright. So, now that we've gotten over gesture, now that we've gotten over structure, now here's what gesture is. Gesture is essentially finding the longest axis at its core. A gesture is about connecting and relating the movement between the forms. It's like, it's the secret sauce that that drives your 3D forms and your figure drawing. To feel alive, gesture must be fluid, watery, graceful, and curved. Each part of a figure has its own gesture between it. So over here on the left is an example of starting with kind of like not really a very flowy gesture, but this is an example of like how you start with gesture and then you build up a 3D shape. I did a demonstration of that. And right here it is like some of the cascading gestury lines I did. So this is an example of a little bit more kind of flowy gesture, like use fluidity to avoid stiff drawings, basically. Like if you're not just drawing you're not just drawing like a cylinder, a boring cylinder. You're drawing something that has like a sense of fluidity to it. Sense of fluidity to it that plays off what the thing is that you're drawing. Like this is kind of like a forearm, again, and it follows the flow of how a forearm would fall. And like this might be a torso, for example. Let's put the nipples on there. Use fluidity to avoid stiff drawings. Actions of figures and materials in life have fluidity to it, like smoke, water, trees, and so on. And this is a key principle that you guys want to memorize. Use the curve to give your drawing, give your drawings of organic things life. And here's like a little doodle I did of like things in nature, animals, trees, like fire, smoke, water, grass, whatever. So another thing I want you to take away from this is I did these notes in real time while I was watching Steve Houston's lecture. Like, this is kind of how you should maybe consider taking notes, like taking visual notes for yourself. Like, think about what he's saying and try to record it. He and other lecturers that you would watch for that kind of stuff, and take your own notes of these sort of things. It makes it really easy for you to do what I'm doing right here, and you should you should maybe do what I'm doing here with your friends, basically, because it's an excellent study method. I'm literally using all of you people here right now as a study hall for myself, as a study group, to go over something that I've just studied, and that's fresh in my head, that I want to memorize. And so I want you guys to all learn how to memorize stuff and how to study stuff as part of what we're doing here, because you're going to be doing more stuff on your own outside of this. Yeah, you're good. It's good and great. Yeah, fine. Take notes from me. Like, you can see you might hook into some observations I made that Steve Houston wasn't quite as clear about or something. I would strongly just recommend going to the source. If you can get a hold of his new Masters Academy series on the beginner figure drawing course that he has, I would get a hold of that and check it out for yourself, because then you can go straight to the source and see how it's really done. But being here talking with me will also bring it to life in a way that just simply watching a video of him won't. And you get the same effect if you go to your friends with your notes and you try to do what I'm doing with them. So what I'm doing here, I want you to start trying to do that with people you know who you can study with, because that's the way you'll memorize it. So, and that's what we're all going to be doing every week when we meet here in the figure drawing room, and other days that I might plan in the future. If there's a need for it, I might rearrange the schedule so we can spread out figure drawing throughout the week. But I'm trying it this way just to start. This week is going to be a trial run of that class schedule I posted in the Discord, and so we're going to evolve things as we go. But anyway, so getting back to my notes, just remember, another key concept to remember is there is a binary system to this that you have to keep in mind, and it works at every level of your drawing. Even when you're getting into rendering, you are going to be remembering this and using this when you get to the later stages of a drawing, and that is a binary system where gesture essentially means curves, structure equals corners. And what that essentially, and we've seen some examples of what that means, especially like, I think the forearm is a great example of that. Like, so what's gesture here, and what's form here, or what's structure here, rather. So, what's gesture here is those lines that I put on the other sides of it, and arguably there could be like another interior line that's going in here following like the kind of line of action or something. But the structure here, the structure starts when I put those ends on there. And it includes the ellipses, and it includes that little cube end there. But on this one, you can especially see this principle in action of how just on the forearm, or on the basic forms of the forearm, you can really see the principle of how gesture is curves and structure is corners in action. So structure is corners over form. So this is what I was talking about on the last page, actually demonstrated it again. Might as well go over it again to reinforce it. But yeah, like this sphere here, which I actually drew some ellipses through in order to describe its direction. Like this is what you do. This is why you'll often see like animators when they use like Disney animators when they draw a cartoon character in the Disney style. You often see like, you'll see a head with like kind of a little plus sign on it. That's to describe where the eye line and the center line is. When they add like a jaw or something to it. This is the technique they came up with for drawing characters of that particular style for animation, though. But anyway, because it's a lot simpler than like drawing like a really elaborate structured head with a jaw or whatever like that. But anyway, so again that what I was describing earlier, like in egg shape, shows how it's tilted better. It has a long to short axis right here that relates to itself, like so you know what direction it's leaning, versus like perfectly like so there. Like you can tell what, if this was a 3D shape, you could tell how long it was leaning versus this to an extent. And so more on that Structure is form and position in 3D space. That means the XYZ axis is going to be something that comes into play with gesture. With a structure. You have to keep in mind the Z depth of the things that you're describing. And this is a couple examples right here of a cube and a cylinder. The aforementioned sphere and egg, by the way, if you wanted to describe them in 3D space, you need to add more corners and more things overlapping each other to the drawing in order to show it. Like if you just drew like a circle, you wouldn't know that it's a sphere in 3D space. But then you put it on a cube, suddenly you can kind of get a sense of it being in 3D space. And then you can also go further, like add a shadow or whatever like that. That's also where like shading comes in to kind of give an illusion of 3D form to lighting. Lighting helps with 3D form. But like also like that aforementioned egg shape, the egg is better off than the sphere already at describing 3D space, because you can kind of visually tell a little better than the sphere what direction it's leaning. You don't know how this is tilted. You don't know what surface is what over here. But you have a general idea of how this thing is tilting. And so you have to keep that in mind, because like we have to kind of think like sculptors and sculpt on the page, but we're not working with 3D media. We are working to create the illusion of 3D media on the page. So you have to use visual cues to describe these forms and to relate them to each other in order to create the illusion. So anyway, here's a technique that I also want you, is very important for all of us, myself included, to memorize and start applying. And we'll be applying this immediately today when we get to the practice and workshop section of this. The pencil test method has the same name as like pencil tests for animation, but this is something different. What the pencil test method is you hold out your pencil at arm's length, so it's always at the same distance from your face with like your arm with your elbow locked out, and you measure and relate the structures you see and how they change their tilt and position in space. That means that you tilt your pencil and kind of feel out the direction of the form of something you're going to draw. Like for example, let's say you're drawing this torso here and you want to define the angles of things, like you're trying to find the angle of the hips down below. If you're trying to find the angle of the tilt of the upper part of the torso and the shoulders and the rib cage, you kind of hold up your pencil and you kind of curve over it. Now the thing is, when you do that, you have to immediately use it because it's fresh in your head. You have it visually in your visual memory. You should immediately look down. You should immediately go down to your page and draw it. This is the secret to finding angles of stuff. This is also the secret to measuring proportions. You use this to not only measure your proportions, but when you measure the angles of things, because things change visual size depending on what angle that they're at, you can use this method to relate the size of things and then kind of measure and gauge how they would change in size while maintaining their proportion to the rest of the figure. Like when an arm is foreshortened towards you versus an arm that is perfectly parallel to you, so you can see its full length. You'd be able to use this technique to relate them to each other, and also to measure off other things in the body that you can use as measuring points to figure out how long they are. But we'll get more into proportion later. This technique is for getting started with this should mainly be used for finding angles and curves and stuff. To figure out how stuff is tilting to and away from you in 3D space. Hang on one sec. Alright, here's another key concept. This one's called facing. And I touched on it in some of the other stuff earlier. But it's very important that you keep in mind and use indications of what direction things are facing. Like, a cylinder is an excellent tool for describing. You're going to be using cylinders to describe most of your forms on a human body. And it's excellent for doing that. But unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of the cylinder is you don't know which directions it's facing. Like, it's the same issue. It's like a stretched out version of the same issue with the sphere, where you don't know like what part of the is this if this was an arm, could we tell if this is the top of the arm or the bottom of the arm here? No, we couldn't. But that's okay. The reason why that's okay is because when you start adding additional details to this that break down the form further, like I don't know, like parts of the forearm and the wrist or things like that, or shapes that relate to it, like where it's bending in the bicep and things like that. Like maybe let's say it's bending over this way. Suddenly, like, it becomes a little clearer what direction the arm is. In this case, this is the back of the palm right here, or the back of the hand, and this is the top of the arm right here. This is the bicep. This is the bicep right here, and kind of the wedge of the arm. So, but yeah, as you start adding more shapes to it, it becomes a little clearer. You can also use cubes, kind of like this, and cubes are also good for finding those forms. And the cube has the advantage of you know which direction it's facing. If this was I was using to simplify a torso versus this, I'm on a little bit clearer footing, kind of. But the disadvantage of this is those corners, those hard-ass corners, don't actually exist in nature for a lot of the stuff you're drawing. And they can be tricky to find. And it's also a little bit more inefficient to draw cubes all the time versus cylinders. Like cylinders, you can just do this. There you go. But the cube, you gotta do this. Like that, kind of. Or we gotta show which direction that this is facing, so. And the reason why is because of this part right here. Like the interior bit you have to draw. The cylinder you only have to do this. And the cube you have to draw that little interior part. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. It's still like the thing is you should use all the above. And combining the shapes is really great. Like a common way to combine the shapes is to do what was done over here. See, there's a cube pelvis kind of here. And then there's a tube that is like the width of the waist. It's going up here to describe the torso. But yeah, lean and tilt is a big deal when sculpting with illusion. And another key concept that I want you to wrap your heads around here with all this that we're doing is the concept of breaking the picture plane. Like, here is the picture plane. It's a dude with a dog or something like that. Like, we imagine the picture plane as being the actual physical plane of a picture. But when you're creating an illusion on the paper, you should be thinking of it in terms of something like more like this. So if this was cutting across here, that'd be cutting across his face about here, let's say. Right there. So this guy, this little kind of crummy cartoon character I've drawn, parts that I'm darkening in here are behind the picture plane. The parts that are coming out, actually I'll do that in red, are going out in front of it. So the picture plane is like a window into 3D space, and you have to keep that in mind. Things don't necessarily always have to pop out of the canvas. Like, there's a lot of stuff that kind of has like a diorama effect where it's a window into a scene going backwards in space. But then you'll see like stuff that looks like it's going to pop off the page, you know. Comic books love doing that. And a lot of dynamic art does too. So the picture plane is something you want to keep in mind when you're creating these shapes. Is you want to figure out what is going out through the 3D plane of the page and what is going further back into it. If that makes any sense. And you would be constructing shapes and thinking of the illusions that you make in those terms. Anyway, but like I said on the last page, you need to create indications of those 3D shapes to create those illusions. So you are, like I said, you're sculpting on the page. But you don't have the advantage of sculptors in that you have a 3D medium that you're working in. We have to create visual cues to create that illusion. And keeping in mind the picture plane as a grounding point to relate to how we make those things and make those shapes to create our illusion is something to keep in mind. Here's another principle that I want you to remember. Practice lots. I mean every day. Try to get in as much as you can and pace it out very well. Like, generally you want to spend about like 3 to 6 to even 9 hours a day practicing this stuff. Or like, even when you are working on like project work, you want to be essentially practicing these methods for what you're working on. Like at every phase of what you're drawing. Remember what I said about that binary system of gesture and structure? You're going to be applying it no matter what you do at any phase of a drawing. So always be applying it. Even when you're working on your more finished work that isn't the formal practice that you would do. But you also do need to do the core fundamentals practice that we'll practice a lot too. The 2 to 4 hours is actually really good, Kripod. The main thing is you want to the main thing is to keep it up every day. Sometimes you may not have enough time to devote even an hour to it. When that happens, use the 15-minute rule. There's so many really highly skilled pro artists that use that rule. On any day that they can't get in a full hour for whatever reason, either they're ridiculously fatigued and tired, or they have other obligations or something, they always get in at least 15 minutes. The reason why you get at least 15 minutes in is, first off, you might start enjoying it and you might find that you have more energy than you thought. You can keep going with it. And you're basically doing triage. You're basically doing triage on your practice, where you probably are going to get out of practice, but just the act of drawing for 15 minutes will help you refresh it and help you keep it in your head and your visual memory and your muscle memory longer, and so that you'll be, when you do get back to, you won't be on bad footing, as bad footing as you would be if you didn't draw at all, when you are able to put in more time. Also, like, it is possible to progress by like just drawing 15 minutes a day. You'll progress very slowly compared to doing those longer sessions, but you will still progress. Alright, so the secret to learning and teaching is to show something or practice it again and again. And that is something we're going to be doing here a lot. We're going to be repeating these ideas. Everything that I showed you here, I'm using that technique already. You know what I just did? I went through a Steve Houston lecture. I took notes. And then what did I do with those notes? I came here. Now I'm regurgitating those notes to memorize them. And what are we going to do? We are going to, immediately after this, practice this together. And then what are we going to do after this? We have homework assignments. We're going to practice it again. And then, next week, we're going to look over this stuff again and re-review it again and practice it again. Of course, we're going to also evolve it and add to it. But we're going to keep practicing this, because this is a lot to dig through, and this is so much stuff. We can, we will evolve this, but we will also be repeating a lot of these concepts. We will evolve this, and we will see different ways to further break things down, and like further examples of how to do this. But yeah. So, another principle to keep in mind is you don't know it unless you can teach it yourself, which means I want you all in here to try teaching this stuff to other people whenever you get the chance. As in the course of trying to learn, even if you aren't getting it right, like, try teaching to other people, and as you go through it, you can say, oh, I'm not too clear on this, I'm going to have to refer back to the notes. That's fine, you're supposed to do that. You and your study buddies are going to be reviewing the notes, going over it again, trying to teach yourselves back and forth. Like if you're studying the torso, you'll have one guy kind of leading the study group, walking through the torso, and then you have another guy lead the group studying, walking through the torso, that sort of thing. However it gets you to memorize it. Literally, what I'm doing to all of you here, I want you to start doing with each other in the course of, like, and you can't just like in addition to replaying the notes back that I'm doing here to memorize it, of course, then you immediately start applying it into practice. So after we get done with all the note stuff here, we are going to go into practice. So another important reason why you want to practice lots is you will get lots of unusual tilts and angles of forms that come up in practice in addition to your repetitive practice. That means, like, you know those drawing manuals with like all those like formal angles and stuff that are kind of pretty predictable that you can practice from? Well, in nature, things are way more complex than that. So that means you're not going to be able to shortcut that. You need to get exposed to it, and you need to see it. That means you're going to be needing to attend and digest as much figure drawing as reference and like figure drawing sessions and other things like that, and observation drawing as much as you can in order to see those angles and try drawing them. So you have encountered them and tried them again and again and again, because a lot of these stuff is so hard. It's hard to memorize all of this. You need to keep regularly practicing. So getting back to form and getting back to structure. Form and position in 3D space is structure. And some concepts here. This is a little bit more of the illustration to here, the notes I took from Steve Houston's lecture about, like, the cubes and the cylinders being used to describe 3D forms, and break down shapes of the body. So what he was talking about with this part is another thing to keep in mind when you're doing your drawings and your studies is the point of view of the artist and the point of view of the audience when you're making your shapes. Like, he gave an example of standing in front of a tall tower. When you see that tower from, like, the tower is by itself. The tower is its own thing. The tower doesn't care about us puny humans. The tower is just a tower. The tower has its own shape and its own structure and stuff, independent of us. But a human standing at the bottom level of the tower perceives it in a different way. The eye line on the horizon is about here for them, and that means that the ellipse that's down below their feet is going to curve down towards their feet on the ground plane. That means the ellipses that are going up are going to continuously tilt up and up and up, going up into space. So the way this form is perceived very differently than, like, somebody who would be positioned from another angle or from very far away where the perspective flattens out. So that is something to keep in mind. Where is your camera? Where is the viewer and the audience positioned in seeing this thing that you are drawing? You can see it. You will perceive forms very differently if you're seeing them from different angles. Like so. Like, I drew a bunch of eyeballs around a cube here, just kind of as an example, and then I drew this little example here myself. Like, looking under a torso, you see the underside of a torso, the kind of torso shape of this little. It's a simple figure I drew. Looking at it from above, you'll see the top side of the shoulders. Looking at it from the front, it would be pretty straight on. This one I didn't actually get to go too far into, but this is the notes I took. I didn't get enough time to really go into this. I actually had to start this lecture before I was able to really fully take the notes from this part of his thing. But he goes over further. Steve Houston goes over further about how to combine gesture with structure. And some examples he gave of that is using the tubes and stuff and curving them. But, like, when you draw a structure, you want gesture embedded in the structure, basically, is what he was talking about. Like, anytime you're doing structure, it's not going to be boring structure. It's going to have some life to it. That's where when the gesture should be embedded to an extent in the structure. That's also why you do the gesture, because the gesture helps you riff off to create the structure, and that means you can curve those cylinders, you can curve cubes. Like, you could use this kind of stuff to, like, describe the bend of a torso or something like that. And you do stuff like I was trying to copy his example that he did from his demo. But we'll get more into that when we do some drawing from some photo drawers. Okay, so I'm gonna actually issue a break very shortly, and then we'll actually get into some some picture drawovers. I'm gonna use maybe some Russian Figure Academy pictures I have, and we will. There we go. Cool. The good thing about the Russian Figure Academy is these are all closed models, so I'm not going to get in trouble with Twitch. There's buttocks, but I don't think Twitch cares about those. So if you want to actually get images like these to practice with, here's two things I'm going to give you. First off, you can Google image search for Russian Figure Academy, and you'll find tons and tons of drawings like these that are excellent resources to copy and study from. The other thing is that this piece of software I'm using is a free piece of software. It's a free and very versatile piece of software called Pre-Raph. Let's see if I can get the link in chat real quick. Pre-Raph. Oh, well, I'll bring up the website on the screen, actually. There we go. Here's Pre-Raph. But yeah, Pre-Raph is a really useful piece of free software where, yeah, they actually demonstrate how to use it on the site. You can drag and drop images from anywhere into like this kind of blank image space like I did. You can resize them, rotate them as you need. You can also like do this, which is like you can basically like ghost them over your drawing programs and then use them directly in the drawing program, like an overlay kind of thing. I'm still learning the ins and outs of it because I just started using them a couple days ago. But you can also export them and print them out. Dogs. But yeah. So I would strongly recommend getting a hold of this because it's going to make things a lot easier. What I do is like Russian Figure Academy drawing. Bring that up over here. Then like oh yeah, that's right, I have to right click to move it around. That's right. Do that and then like yoink, yoink, yoink. Whoops. I think it already recognized that image again. Yoink. And then like select those, resize them as I need, and so on. And you can also export the image itself. Let's see here. Where's export? Well, it's in there somewhere, but yeah, you can export the image. And print, you can export this and then print out the whole thing. Also, you can like center in on images with spacebar like that. So when we get back from the break, we're going to be doing studies from stuff like this. I would grab your own reference from this, from Russian Figure Academy things, to practice for yourself, and load them into Pre-Raph. Start making your first image reference file, and then we will be doing some draw-over studies of these things, breaking down their shapes. Sort of what Steve Houston, like kind of meditate on what Steve Houston was talking about. So I'm gonna issue maybe a 10-minute break. Okay, Google, set timer 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Starting now.
All right. If you have any questions in chat, I'll be happy to answer them, although I will be stepping up for the break right now. Alright, so I am basically doing this for free, running these classes and stuff, but through Ethan Becker's Discord, we also have a tip jar for the people that run classes and workshops like this. A tip jar section in the lobby, under the lobby tab, that includes like PayPal and coffee information and things like that. If you're willing to donate to anyone who runs these classes, myself included, to give us tips are welcome for what we're going to be doing. And you can also give Twitch Prime. I'm going to be regularly using Twitch for streaming these, so if you have a Prime sub or bits that you can throw my way, that would also help too. But yeah, I mean, it's at your discretion. I know a lot of people are going through financial problems right now because of what's going on with the economy, so don't feel obligated to give, but it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Don't say no. 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 Keep holding out, but you don't let go. I'm giving up. I'm trying.
So we're just about back. So some people are understandably a little intimidated by saying the Russian Figure Academy stuff. Well, if you look at it really closely, particularly this image, it's using literally everything I just was talking about with Steve Houston stuff. If you really look at it, you can see where they kind of broke things up into cylinders and cubes. Definitely in that skeleton on the left. But you can even see it on like the on the muscle and anatomical figure in the center. And if you really look for it, you can kind of see it in like around the edges. You can see some of the gesture lines that were done to kind of find the shapes or find the gesture of the limbs and the different parts of the body and stuff. A little hard to see on this one because it's a really low quality image, but you can see a little bit of it there. There's a little bit of the ghosting of some of the gestural sketching that went under it in order to kind of find and work out where the positions of the limbs are and so on. Like some of the spots where you can see it going on is like here. You can see a little of it. You can really see it on the skeleton, like right there and right there. But they go through the same stuff. They go through the same stuff that Steve Houston was talking about, that I took notes on. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do a demo, and then I want a demo or two, and then I want to basically have you guys to just chill out with me for the rest of like the remainder of this. I think we have about like 40 minutes left. No, we get more than that. Dang, what time is the class end? Yeah, we got about like an hour and 40 minutes. I don't. No, that can't be right. I think we got an hour and 40 minutes, don't we? But yeah, for the remainder of this time will be workshop time. We will be taking specifically Russian Figure Academy pictures, and or on your own you can pick. I might actually grab some. Actually, I might show you how I go through grabbing reference a little bit more, like from Pinterest and other things, and make my own reference boards right here. But all of us right now are going to be like chilling out and practicing together. For those of you who are more advanced here, who kind of know what you're doing, you can just jump right in and get started. But basically, I want you to hunt down a bunch of reference images, like the Russian Figure Academies, which is a good starting point. You can also I would want you, if you're doing figure drawings, I would want you to favor clear, well-lit, well-photographed pictures of figures. Preferably nude. That's the other thing. I can't show nudes I can't show art nudes here. Like, the figures have to be clothed in some capacity. And thankfully, like all the Russian Figure Academy models are all clothed. So if you want to do art nudes, you're going to have to do that on your own outside of this. That's also why I have homework periods on Tuesday and Thursday, so I can practice whatever I want without worrying about anything like this. The other thing is that we have homework for this class, and I'll give you a list of the homework shortly. So the homework is like, do what you can of it. It's something to give you pretext and context for something to stick with, to share next time you're here, or to get feedback on. Try to keep it flexible enough so that like anyone at any skill level can get something out of it. The homework is 3 series, like a minimum of 1 to 9 pages, I believe, total. A series of 1 to 3 pages each of 3 different lessons, 3 different exercises. 2 of them are draw over and copy stuff. 2 of them are like draw over studies, and 1 of them is focused on figure drawing from photos or from life. I'm just finishing my rice. Alright. So, yeah. Let me open my Google Doc real quick so I can remember what the homework is. Okay, here's the homework. I'll bring it on screen. Homework is 1 to 3 pages of photo reference draw over studies of figures, preferably nude or partly clothed. Things to focus on. I want you to focus on the line of action and the longest axis of a figure, and the figure's parts, the longest axis of the parts. And I want you to work from the longest axis into creating the gesture. And I want you to break up the figure into basic shapes. That means cubes, cylinders, spheres. Cylinders especially. And also, after you've drawn over the figure a few times, try drawing the figure freehand, or using it to create a new pose. Or this one's optional right here, by the way. Optional step. And use the pencil test method of measuring the angles and the measurements with your pencil and applying it to the drawing. This goes for all of these, by the way. The other 2 pieces of homework are 1 to 3 pages of figure drawing studies that are either from observation of real-world figures, like figure drawing or figure drawing class, cafe sketching, or from photo or video reference. Ideally use nude figures. So this one is not draw over. This one is not draw over studies. These ones are drawing from observation. So I want you to do a mix of draw over studies and drawing from observation. And then 1 to 3 pages of combination draw overs and copy studies of existing art from good draftsmen. That includes drawing manuals like Andrew Loomis, Vern Hogarth, George Bridgman, Glenn Villepeu, Steve Houston, etc. I'll leave that up to you to find resources like those. Feel free to ask around the Discord for advice on that. But those are some good names to go through. In particular, Andrew Loomis and George Bridgman are public domain, so you can find the PDFs of their work pretty easily. Also, you can use classic or modern illustrators with clear figure drawing. Granted, like some of these are going to be closed figures, but you can use them anyway. But like J.C. Leyendecker and Norman Rockwell, Alex Ross, the superhero artist, and the Russian Figure Academy drawings. These are some examples. I leave it to you to kind of figure out and find those. And then old masters' work, like classical, Renaissance, post-Renaissance work, and ancient Greek and Roman sculpture work. So that's what it is. 1 to 3 photo reference draw overs. That means you draw on top of the figure and try to break it down. 1 to 3 pages of figure drawing studies from observation of real world figures or photos. And then 1 to 3 pages of combination draw over and copy studies of existing art of good draftsmen. So that means drawers of photos, observation drawings of figures and photos for the figures, and then combination drawovers and observation copy studies of good artists. So literally what I'm doing right now with the Russian Figure Academy stuff is the third one of these pieces of homework right now. And then there's also, in addition to the stuff I listed above, any additional figure drawing sessions you can do beyond the homework listed here. The more figure drawing you can do, the better. But this is something to give you a pretext of something to use throughout this week. Ideally, you want to do a little bit of this each day and do more of it where and when you can. If you are a concept illustrator or something like that, if you're working on a project piece, you can do these as preparation for, or you can do studies like these relevant to what you are doing for like your comic or your animation or your illustration. You grab some photo reference, draw over and study it, and then utilize it then in addition to that actually counting as your homework, you utilize it in your concept or your finished piece. So we're going to get started on, let me make a fresh file. So I'm not going to fiddle with that ghosting technique that we used. I'm just going to grab and copy paste stuff directly into this. Well, actually no, I can export the thing, I think. Let me see if I can export this whole thing here, and then I can just use it directly. Alright, so there is an optimized, there it is. And then I can save this. Right here. Oh, there's export. Export is under save. Cool. All images, you can select it. You can do selected images or all images, that's handy. Let's do all though. Alright. Oops, that's the wrong thing. Oh, but this is, oh, actually, this was another export that I did earlier of JC Leindecker stuff. But yeah, this was one of the artists I recommended doing studies from. I'll leave that in the page because then I can use that too. Where did it save to though? Maybe I didn't save it right. Here, let's see here. Oh, it went into ref images, duh. Alright, so import image. Let's grab that in there actually. Oh. It exported all the images individually. Alright, we'll get this right. Scene. That's what I needed. Alright, should work now. Sorry, I just got this software, so I'm learning how to use it. And there's a way to ghost it over your image, so I could just like use it without even importing it into the software. But I don't want to fiddle with that right now. Alright, so first things first, drop the opacity. And I'm gonna get started. So I'm gonna like think about what Steve Houston was talking about like the differences between the binary language of shape of like structure versus gesture, and the other principles he went over. And a good way for me to orient myself in thinking that way is to take excellent work by experienced draftsmen, analyze it and draw over it, and get that in my bloodstream. That's why you want to do these. You want to absorb this stuff, so then it will help you re-gauge your eye, your hand and eye. Like if you're coming back into figure drawing very, very rusty, it can be a good idea to do what I'm doing here. Which I am. I'm coming into this super rusty. So maybe I want to bring up the size of this even bigger. Let's get rid of line Becker. Blow this up. Alright, so I'm just going to just jump right in. Like, what is the simplest line I can find following the form? On all of these, to be honest. I'm doing kind of like an egg sailboat shape sort of thing here. Thinking about what Steve Houston says in his head drawing stuff that I've also done before. So I'm using other things that I already know about that newbies here might not know about. But I'm trying little bits of things. I'm dipping my toes here and there and stuff. Like, see right here, I did like a cube shape for the wrist there. And then I'm doing a cylinder back here for the arms, like so. I take those, and I think about adding adding these kind of spherical organic forms in here for the muscles, keeping it simple, kind of looking at what they were drawing underneath here a little bit, thinking about how the form is, like how the 3D form is on this elbow joint, for example. And then I can do something like, here's a good one, here's a good exercise, here's a good way to break it down. For the hips, you can do a kind of a cube shape, like that, using like the corners of the pelvis as the top of the cube, like that, and then you've got like this kind of cube shape that's tilting forward right here. And then if you notice, this is what Steve Houston was talking about, where you create a tube that goes upwards that's the same width as that cube of the pelvis. I'm adding a center line there, a little bit off center there. That center line goes down to that front of the pelvis there. It goes up here to the sternum with the rib cage. So like the upper torso is twisting a little bit compared to this that's tilting down there. The angle of this is kind of like that, and the angle of this is like this. That's the other thing. When you're drawing when you're drawing on top of these, you don't have to do the you don't have to do the sightline method because you're doing it directly on the page. But when you are when you're not drawing on top of things like this, then you want to use this, and that is your cheat sheet to be able to basically do a draw over without doing a draw over, to find those angles and stuff. Of course, I'm trying to interpret as much as I can. I'm trying to take little bits and pieces of stuff that I'm seeing here and digest it. This is a figure that was already drawn, so the ideas in it are already worked out. I'm just trying to think about what they did, what things I can look for in it. You have to have a somewhat of a different mindset about this when you're drawing over in a photograph, though, because the photograph is a live figure that has not been worked out into a drawing. So you can still learn from it, you can still kind of draw over it similarly to this. But you need to think about it more in terms of how to break down what might be reading better, to break it down in a way that might read better, or that you could alter and modify for your own purposes. And you can still do that with these too. But I'm really trying to walk through what these masters did, and maybe take little tiny bits and pieces of their mastery of form to kind of understand what they go through in these drawings. And think out some more about what Steve Houston was talking about with making basic shapes that imply the forms. I'm going a little bit too contoury and anatomical with some of these when I should be doing something for this thigh, for example. I can just do this. This is closer to something you might see during a gesture drawing phase of a figure lay-in, the way that I'm drawing now. And we'll go over figure lay-ins over the course of this drawing season in future lessons. But for the time being, I want people to get thinking in terms of breaking down the figure into a combination of gesture and 3D shapes, and even trying to combine the two. And by combining the two, it means you curve some of your forms in 3D space. Look at this. So these thighs here, you can kind of box the ends of them with the knees. They are the cylinder tubes, but they have kind of a box for the knee shape at the end of them. And then there's the principle of those parallel lines, see, over the top of the thigh, like that, over the side of the thigh. But you can do this for hours. This is really relaxing. It's really fun. It gets it in your bloodstream. And when you go from doing this to doing a figure drawing session, you'll have muscle memory in your head of this stuff. And if you feel lost looking at a figure, remember this trick. Using your pencil, arm's length, fully extended out, close one eye, open the other. Measure and tilt your pencil, hold it upright at whatever angle you need to kind of see what the angle is, and then like kind of move your pencil across the angle. Like let's pretend that like we're looking at a real figure for one of these, and let's pretend that we need to find the angle on one of them. Where'd my menus go? How'd that happen? It's weird. It's that one. Oh. So also the other thing about this is not tracing. That's the other thing. Tracing is copying the outline of something. We are trying to break down and understand the interior. This is an understanding tool. You use this to understand existing drawings and how an artist broke down the forms, so you can take something and learn something from it. And you use this to break down and understand photographs of things from nature and things from reality. You can use this technique with anything, by the way. Anything that you're trying to learn how to draw, pretty much. Breaking things down into the 3D shapes. If you're drawing a vehicle, obviously you're going to be using very, very geometric shapes, but you'd be surprised at how much vehicle design makes great use of gesture. Wow. This file size, I might have to delete the line Becker image. Jeez. I think it hates the massive files. What the hell is up with this? Am I gonna have to restart this? Oh, there it goes. Alright, I'm gonna have to delete the line Becker because I think the images here are really huge. I'm kind of learning here about like just how big the image files should be in this. I tend to work on like way larger DPI than I probably should. That's a really crummy habit. But anyway. Alright, so let's grab this dude. Let's pretend like we're drawing this dude, and we're mainly looking at his torso and his hips. Now, pretend that you're like holding up your pencil at arm's length in front of you, and pretend the red line I'm going to draw is where you're going to try to find the angles. Oh, I can tell what angle his rib cage is by looking at that, and I'm doing this in 3D space. Oh, and I can kind of tell that I can see the side of his torso here. So there's kind of that going on here too. Oh, and I can see the center line of his torso here. So I'm going to go down like that, down to the pit of the crotch, where it kind of curves like that. Oh, and I can see the angle of his hips right here. The tops of his the bones of the hips right there at this angle. And also, like, because I found this, now I know where the top of the rib cage is. It's going to be the same angle as this one down here. So you get kind of that. So in this case, I'm going to decide to use, for the purpose of this study, I'm going to use box forms. Even though I might usually like to use an egg shape for the shape of the rib cage, I'm going to use box forms for the purposes of this study. Because I really want to think about the 3D forms of stuff. Alright, so down to the pelvis. I make these little connecting lines right here, kind of connecting the twist of the pelvis a little bit. Maybe I bulge that a bit because it's compressing and stretching on these sides right here. This is something we'll get more into when we get into specific areas of the body. But there is a compression and a stretch that happens, like kind of an accordion effect on the torso when it's bending. And almost always, like, except unless somebody's standing perfectly ramrod straight, you're always going to see something like this bent, like twisted one way or the other in people's torsos and waists. Anyway, so I'm going to maybe make the bottom of the cube. The pit of the crotch doesn't have to be exact. somewhere down there, I would say. Add some more to the cube. And I want to maybe draw the inside and behind the cube, because I want to understand this 3D shape that I'm drawing. If you notice, I've drawn inside the cube here, like as if we're seeing an X-ray vision version of the cube. This is so I can visually understand what it is I'm drawing three-dimensionally. That's for me. So notice I said the bottom of this cube is at this angle right here. Like, this is facing away from us, looking down. But that also means that this upper area has to be at a similar angle, parallel to that, down there, because it is a cube. So I'm going to fix that right now. This is not going to be perfect. The purposes of the study is to try to further understand and improve at what I'm doing, after all. Like, your study shouldn't be perfect. You should think about what you're doing and why, and get some whatever it is you're trying to get out of what you're doing, and then move on to the next one. I'm feeling like for this, I maybe want to add. I'm pretty satisfied with this little study here right now. Whoops. So I could move on, but I think I want to add maybe some cylinders for the arms, and maybe a cylinder for the head. So I'll do this. When you start off a cylinder, what do you start out with? You start off with a long axis, then you draw another parallel one, then you define the ends of the cylinder. So I'm kind of maybe turn this off and see what angle his hand is at. It's kind of hard to see because it's really going behind his body. So I'm going to have to make a judgment call here. But I think that his palm is facing us a little bit. So that would imply that his wrist is maybe facing away from us at that point. Let's look at the directions that he drew on the lines here. It looks like it's kind of curving like this. So maybe our ellipse is something like this. And DM me if there's a problem with the audio in the Discord, because I think I might have disconnected from the audio there. But it should be, the audio should be working in Twitch. Just had a little minor audio problem, that's all. Alright, so I got that. I'm pretty satisfied with that one, so I'm going to do this one. And because this is like, because his arm is like extended out here, I'm just going to do the whole thing as one long cylinder. Of course it's not one long cylinder, but for the purposes of this, we're keeping it simple because we can always modify it later and add in the joints as we need them. Like, if I wanted to figure out where the joint was later, I think of it in terms of like a peg that's shoved in through the arm, almost kind of like that. Yeah, I'll leave that out of there for now because I'm not thinking in those terms at the moment. So I'm actually going to attach a cube here for the palm on the body. A palm is a bendy cube, like this. Whoops. And here's the finger. Here's where the fingers stick out. That's where the fingers stick out right there. But this is the palm. We'll go over hands in more detail in future session. Anyway, let's get the rest of this. I'm going to maybe include a bit of the buttocks in with this cylinder I'm going to do. And of course, these are going to be 2 cylinders connected by this part right here. And we got this right here. I'm going to do the other one too, because I like relating these. I feel like I would want to definitely relate these 2 legs to each other. Also, I want to say, so I see that there's some people on Twitch chat who are agonizing about not being able to afford digital art tools. The good news is, here's what you need to become a master draftsman. You need something to draw on, you need something to draw with, and you need an eraser. If you have those 3 things, you can become a master draftsman. Which means that you could literally just use basic cheap pencils and cheap printer paper or something to draw on. And then you spend hours and hours eating up that paper, that cheap paper, and those pencils. And you haven't had, and it's much cheaper overall than buying digital drawing tools. Depending on how cheap you go, obviously. There's one of the big reasons why people use digital drawing tools is they can be a lot less expensive than buying like paints or like any number of other art materials that are ridiculously expensive. Anyway, I'm just going to include like little bits of anatomy knowledge in here that I have of like, this is for me. Like if you understand some of this stuff, you can play with it in your studies. I decided to use a box form for the head because I'm kind of thinking about it in those terms. We will go into how to break down a lot of this stuff in specifics in future courses. But I mean, like this is the kind of stuff you just take it. The other thing about this is you take it really slow. Like this is not a race. You just think through it at your own pace. If you want to just like do, like if you want to just do this, just to kind of loosen up. Like I'm not really too concerned about accuracy or anything like that right now. I'm just playing loose. Like this is kind of how you would do this if you're doing a quick sketch on like a 1-minute pose or something like that. And you can like go through figure after figure doing them really quickly like that, just to kind of get a sense of the flow of the figure. Maybe just like a line of action like that. Do that. So the wireframe figure, kind of get a sense of the pose. You can mix it up with like the longer and shorter stuff like this. Of course, I am paying attention to things in here like the tilt of the hips. I'm paying attention to kind of like the weight that's going on here and the attitude of the pose. But I mean, like I said, it's not a race. Like you really should slow down when you do some of these, but if you want to loosen up, and you feel like kind of pressure to really kind of like be meticulous about it, you can always loosen up and do something a little bit more lively and not really worry about too much about accuracy. Just the purpose of it is just the purpose of doing that is just to loosen yourself up so you don't get stiff. So remember, it's gesture and structure. Like I slowed down to do more structure into this one, but I was also using gesture. But I also feel like I could go really stiff if I lean too hard into that structure. So I might just like do this for a little while, you know? Just not even really care. Just kind of play with the flow of the line and stuff. Just get a feel for it. Of course, I don't do that the whole time, because if I do this too much, I'll get too loosey-goosey. So then I tie it back down by slowing down and doing stuff like this. This one's a pretty good one to do that on, because this one you can... look at that. You can see the different phases right on the figure of how this guy worked this up. Yeah, so you can see that's... Okay, so there's two phases of line that you can kind of see him using here. One is this really, really light line that's kind of going in there. That is what he used to find the initial gesture. And then he went through again and he did this, which defined a little bit more of its form to contain it a bit. He didn't draw across it, but he doesn't need to for this. Like, there's little tiny bits where he kind of added indication of things, of its dimensionality, like here, for example. He'd go through, of course, and he'd like add in shading and things like that describe the form more. But it doesn't really need to do it for something like this, because, you want to know why? Oh, hang on, I gotta wait. It's doing the autosave thing. But when it comes back, I was going to say that the reason why is because he has the ends on his cylinder, basically, which describe the 3D form. He does not have them on this one, if you notice. So this one kind of looks quite a bit more flat. So you can literally see like the phases of the drawing that you would go through in these. But anyway, newcomers, feel free to like watch this and stuff, or just like anyone who wants to, feel free to watch this. But I would strongly, strongly, strongly recommend, definitely for this last hour, definitely for this last hour that we're here, pulling up images and studying from and doing what I'm doing, basically, like drawing on top of them. If you don't have a means to do that, then you can just use it. Then you can just do copy studies from a computer screen. Just do your best to try to study these. So whether you're doing a draw over study like I'm doing, or you're trying to copy study it, you're going to get something out of it. And yes, these broadcasts will be recorded and reposted later. Yeah, Twitch will automatically save my thing, and I'll make sure I download it and re-upload it somewhere, I think. Yeah. Well, one of the things I definitely want to get in the future is a third monitor for myself, so I can multitask a little bit better and read both Twitch and Discord chat at the same time. It's hard to do that the way things are currently set up for me. So hit that subscribe button, folks. Or send me a coffee donation or a PayPal donation, and I can have a little bit more disposable income to get a multitasking monitor for these sessions. Blah 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 Twitch Prime or something. 5 monitors. For me, I think an ideal setup would be a 1 monitor over my workspace that has my reference on it, and 1 monitor for multitasking, and that's in addition to the 22-inch Cintiq I have. So anyway, like these drawovers, like if you are studying a particular thing, like say like this week you're studying structure of head drawing or something like that, then you can use this to as a means to practice that safe in a kind of a safe, controlled setting that lets you like kind of walk through more accurately measuring out stuff, because like when you're drawing it freehand, it can get kind of daunting, and it can be easy to let things get out of proportion and out of whack. Of course, like I said, in addition to finding angles and stuff, the tool to correct proportions when drawing freehand is that measuring technique. You can also use your thumb and your forefinger if you're working digitally to kind of measure stuff out. Your front thumb and your forefinger on your non-drawing hand. You'll sometimes see digital artists doing that on top of their screen. I think I should probably talk a little. I'm going to dip into doing a little bit of head drawing structure, I think. Why not? Let's move that guy onto the side. So head drawing is something we're going to go over in depth, because you need to get good at head drawing in order to measure the rest of your figure. So a future session will be very, very heavy into head drawing. In fact, maybe multiple sessions might be covering head drawing. But so the basic structure of the head for this particular, there's different approaches to constructing the head, but I'm going to show off the Andrew Loomis method. So you start with a sphere. This is a head that would be facing directly at us. Start with a sphere. Then you chop off the sides of the sphere. A little ways in like that. You of course have a center line on the sphere. And you have a halfway point in the sphere. So the halfway point, that's the brow. That's not the eye line. That's the brow line. On Disney characters, you'll often see that line becomes the eye line, or sometimes like on kind of anime-ish characters or whatever, you'll see like that that line is the eye line. But for this, that's the brow line. So the way you find the chin on this, one sec, is you have to find the top of the brow. The top of the brow is usually a little ways down, about here-ish. There is a way to measure it and find it that I'll show that that's a little bit more apparent from side view. In fact, I'll do that now actually. Here, let's do profile. So we got its head in profile right here, like that. Head's facing that way. So the way you find the brow is you cut a line diagonally across this, and then you curve a line up over the sphere, and there's your brow. And you measure out from the brow down here, the hairline, sorry, that's the hairline. You measure out from the hairline down to the brow, then you sight size that, so literally like This is where your thumb and forefinger come into play, but I'm copy pasting this on screen to show it. Oops. So this is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. This is about where the bottom of the jaw is going to be. So drop these lines down here. Bottom of the jaw is going to be about there. And then to find the angle of the back of the jaw, you use the back of the sphere here. And then of course to find this part right here, that is connected to the side of that, the side of the sphere you chopped off. And then from this that you've created here, this has a top and a bottom. You cut that in half, and that's the eye line. So the eye is going to be about here. And then, because you have the thirds to measure it, the bottom of the nose is going to be about here. Brows here. Hairline's there. Top of the ear is here. I'm going to do this in blue so it's a little bit more apparent. Top ear here. So in front view, it's the same measurements. Since I took all those measurements, I can bring them over here. Now I'm going to have to adjust them because it's not exact to what I drew on the left. But, I mean, it's the same idea. So I actually need to review my head proportions, so some of this is going to be off a bit. My rules for head proportion stuff, so I might want to terminate the little mini detour I went on here, because I kind of actually have forgotten like how the corners of the bottom of the jaw are placed, for example. But I mean, it's the same idea. Like I use the same measurements in profile that you do for this. For straight on, top of the ears are here, eye line is here. Oh, the other thing is that you divide. This is divided into thirds for where the eyes are placed, and roughly the corners of the mouth are located about the center point of the eye. Of course, my mouth position is a bit off because I haven't measured that. Like this, in order to place the features in here, you further break down the mouth area into thirds. Like the top of the, I think the top of the lip would be there. The chin, like the divot for the chin would be there. Something like that. Yeah, I'll have to do that when I review head drawing again. So we'll be walking back through all this again, in detail and focus. But this, I wanted to do this as kind of like a refresher to see if I had any gaps in my memory of doing that, and I apparently do. So I'm gonna have to refresh my head drawing for sure. Anyway, getting back to this dude. I really like how cubic his head is. Or actually, no, I'm gonna maybe use his head to do that kind of Lima's head I was doing. So got kind of an ellipse there. And then of course I can use this as a cheat sheet. The top of the brow is about there. His ears aren't perfectly on the brow line, but it's pretty close. The angle is something like that, I think. You can tell the angle is further that from that up there. But here's the side plane of that head right there. That's been chopped off. Let's get that. Yeah, I got this kind of off, didn't I? No, it's closer than I thought. Okay. Alright, so. But I'm using this as an example of like, if you need to practice drill something like that, you can do drawovers of the approach that you would use in a figure drawing class to break down these heads, or the different break down stuff like these heads or anything else you're going to draw, really. I'll do one more of these and I'm going to move back to the body. But yeah, like, this guy does not have a visible hairline, so you really need that measurement in order to kind of, like, the idea of the hairline is it is the kind of the peak angle of where the head kind of changes direction. A little bit, but it's not going to be perfectly like a cube. It's usually pretty rounded. And of course, like, everyone's skull shape varies, but it's a point of simplification you can use for finding these simplified shapes of a head. When we do get further into head drawing, you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff like this, where there's kind of a raccoon eyes effect, like that. You're going to be seeing use of the tooth cylinder, which is like literally a cylinder in the front of the face for the jaw and the teeth. I'm not going to go too much further into that for the head drawing. I want to do the rest of the body. So this guy, it's got kind of that going on with it. So I'm gonna, whoops. Yeah, squash potato. Proku's video on the Loomis method is pretty good. Yes, and also the reason why I wanted to show that off, show off what I did, there are 2 tricks in it that the Proku video does not use. Those 2 tricks were finding the jaw angle using the back of the back of the skull, or the back of the sphere of the skull, and the other trick was cutting that diagonal line. Like here were the 2 tricks. Well, I can point them out at the other drawing I did. There's that trick, there for finding the angle of the jaw here. And the other trick is this. And then you wrap, it's very important, you're wrapping this over the form, by the way. Because it is a sphere. It's coming up from the sphere. Yeah, those 2 tricks are something that Proku does not go over, that are actually used by the Watts Atelier folks. And we might actually use some of their methods in future stuff, because the people who originally taught me how to draw when I first learned were the Watts Atelier folks. And I'd very much like to refresh my memory of their stuff. Yeah, we'll definitely go over some of Watts Atelier stuff in the future. I'm concentrating on Steve Houston for now, because he's got his is very much more animator oriented than Watt's Atelier stuff would be. And my the future efforts that I'm going to have in this class, that I'm going to gear this class towards, will be animator oriented. So we're going to be seeing a lot more action study stuff. We're going to be seeing a lot of really dynamic poses with intent and acting in them. And we'll also be getting a lot more quick poses in too, in addition to these longer poses and longer studies that we're going to do. Yeah, I have a course curriculum that I've done a rough draft of. Let me show you the course plan that I have this week. If you're in the Discord, you can see it in the class schedule section. But let me bring it up on Discord. If I can find it. There we go. So here's a rough draft of the schedule that I have planned. Oops. Ignore Dante there. So Monday is where we're at right now. The black lines right there are an 1.5-hour break period usually. So we're going to be at this for the next like 40 minutes or so. That means that this period right here, by the way, is mainly going to be a workshop period. We're going to be back at about 2:30. The 2:30 class is going to be more oriented toward, not towards beginners, but to advanced people and maybe people who saw the earlier class. We're going to be doing longer, more directed study stuff. And then I'm not sure if I'm going to be the one running the figure workshop tonight, but the 7 to 10 p.m. is an uninstructed figure drawing session that's going to be emphasizing somewhat longer poses. Or it should be. It might just be like the regular draw this video. But anyway, yeah, like this is what I'm doing a trial run of this week. So Monday figures. Tuesday is homework day. Tuesday has we're going to be doing a thing called, there's the 2 clubs meeting on Tuesday and Thursday. The clubs meet for about an hour and 10 a.m. But they're kind of parasocial. We will set up a Discord channel, text channel for things for them. Reference Hunters Club is a club that is basically a support group for artists that want to get in the better habit, want to exercise better habits of gathering their reference. It is literally just a come in and let's talk about gathering reference, talk about strategizing how we're going to gather reference, and go out and gather or make reference. And for reference, that can be anything from like finding photos and videos on the internet for the projects and these homework you're going to do, or if you're an animator or if you're an illustrator, that would be making videos of yourself relevant to what you want to illustrate. Shooting your live action video reference of yourself, acting out your scenes for animation or whatever else you're going to do. And the rest of the day is going to be homework time to work on homework from these classes. These classes, or really anything, really. This schedule is actually just mainly for me. Like, this is a curriculum I created for myself that I'm going to basically be quote-unquote teaching. It's almost as if I'm in a college class where I am the professor and the student, basically. So Tuesday is going to be animal drawing workshop in 7 to 10 p.m. This is Pacific time, by the way. Concept design is where you're going to be developing your concept work for whatever projects you are currently working on or want to work on. And it will involve everything's holistic here. So like the reference you gather here is going to be fodder for this, and the reference you gather here is going to be fodder for this. The stuff you do here is going to be practice and fodder for this, and the stuff you do here is going to be practice and fodder for this. Or I have an animation and storyboarding class also. but we might have like illustration classes in 3D and other disciplines in the Discord taught by other people in the future. My curriculum is going to be oriented around what I want to learn, because this is, like I said, this is like as if I've enrolled myself in a curriculum I want to learn, where I'm the professor and the student. Anyway, so Sketchbook Club, this is similar to the Reference Hunter. This is very similar to the Reference Hunters Club. It's a we touch base about maintaining and utilizing sketchbooks and searching for inspiration of things to try in sketchbook. Sketchbooks are very useful tools for artists. They are a combination of something that you use to jot down ideas, to try different techniques, to play with things, to do observation sketching in, and to also use as a wild card to try out things that you don't normally get to try out in your other big projects, or if you have a full-time job working in an art industry and you want to draw something different from what you normally have your time completely consumed by everyday drawing. Thursday also has a character drawing theme workshop. This is going to be very, very animator oriented. So that means story and character driven. Usually with story and character driven, that means like usually kind of similar to the costume figure drawing day. It's going to be about like creating characters and scenes out of the figures that you're drawing. Like you can even the reason why I put it here actually for my animation curriculum is the idea that you would practice drawing your character that you're animating, and drawing them in different poses. You also this also might involve like artist themed stuff. Like we might have a Mike Magnolia day here where we try drawing figures in how Mike Magnolia draws them, or we copy Mike Magnolia drawings in addition to art model copies, or any other artists really. I just used him as an example. But yeah, so there's storyboard class. We already just had one session of that, and there's homework for that available. It's pretty starter homework. We're going to go further in this. Storyboard, of course, will feed back into animation, because what you storyboard in storyboard class is going to be animated at some point. Hopefully. At least that's how I'm structuring it. Like, I have some projects for myself in mind that I'm going to do. Anyway, so this other stuff right here, this is like optional stuff. Free homework days, and you can either use it for free time or homework or whatever. This is like a curriculum I set up for myself, but this is what the schedule is going to be if you want to show up. We're also going to have various guest lecturers from week to week and stuff. Right now we have, in addition to me teaching the 10 a.m. course here to give every people an introduction to concept design stuff, we're going to also have a professional concept artist who works in really the games industry, who is going to be teaching a guest lecture at 2:30, at the 2:30 period this Wednesday. One of our Discord members, a guy named Tavish. But anyway, so we're still evolving this. Like I literally invented this thing with the help of help and feedback from other people in the Discord, like just this last week, and so I'm just giving it a trial run now. And ideally as I evolve this, I want to keep it up kind of like a school semester would, where we keep this up for like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, if I can really stomach it. And then we have a break period. But my personal goal right now is I want to at least do this week, as much of this week as I can, and evolve things as I go. And I want to... and then if I can do that, I want to push it to at least 2 weeks, because one of the things I want to use is I want to use a 2-week rule, which is something that I got an idea from one of the guest lecturers that we are going to have for the animation class and maybe a couple other things is a lady who teaches at Gobelins in France, the prestigious animation school. She's currently working on a feature film right now, so she can only devote so much time, but she's been really generous already and done a few guest lectures through our Discord already. But we will have she was actually who helped me formulate the curriculum that I have for myself. And I'll be continually shaping it with her help and the help of other people in the Discord. Anyway, for the time being, everyone, you should be practicing. So just chill out and just grab some photos. If you don't have anything to draw with, you can use this time to just gather tons of reference and start drawing later. This afternoon's class, it will be a continuity with what we just done here, but we might do more. Like, I'm going to do that one assuming that most of the people who are walking in are people who are not beginners. The 2:30 class is going to assume that people are more advanced and are coming in to practice what they know. Although we will go over, we will actually touch base with what was done this morning before we step in too far. So anyway, if you have questions, like the way I have things currently set up, I can't see I can't see Discord chat, but I can see Twitch chat. So if you can come into my Twitch chat, I can answer questions. How many hours a day do you recommend practice? Well, I am in favor of trying to treat it like a full-time job if you are able to. So that means you want to get a reasonable amount of hours in, like a 9-to-5 job kind of thing, and you want to maybe have slow days, maybe twice a week. Like if you notice how I had things set up on my schedule, Saturday and Sunday are a little slower. This Saturday being a big rest day. Doesn't mean necessarily stop practicing. You can still sketch, and sometimes the kind of sketching you can do on your break days can be really relaxing. But sometimes you do need to step away from drawing for a bit. But even when you do, I would suggest using the 15-minute rule. Get at least 15, even on your off days, get at least 15 minutes in. Big thing though, when you are trying to study, it is not a good idea to burn yourself out and do more than what you could reasonably handle during a 9-to-5 job. Because the idea is you want regularity and you want to be really well rested when you study the stuff. Because it's important. You're going to be, if you overdo it, you're going to be repeating the stuff because your brain didn't absorb it. A good format to use for your practice, for your sessions, and I am actually using it on my schedule, is the 3-hour rule. Where you pick a subject, go over the subject, and then practice it for 3 hours, repeating it over and over again. The reason why 3 hours is the first hour you're struggling, second hour you're kind of getting into the swing of it. The third hour, roughly about the third hour, is where you really you actually start learning and absorbing it. And then if you overdo it, although sometimes if you're really feeling it, you can go further if you like. So energy levels can vary depending on the day or whatever. And then if you want to avoid going over that, though, because then you can exhaust yourself and it won't sink in, and what you've just learned won't sink in. It's like that effect that you get with cramming for a course. Like, you know how when you cram for a test the night before by like just overloading yourself with information, and you remember it for the test, but then you don't remember it after that because you didn't take time to digest it and integrate it and memorize it and make it second nature, and also because you didn't get enough sleep to kind of reintegrate that knowledge into your brain. This is very important. Good sleep and good rest is important for the learning process. So I strongly encourage artists to take good care of themselves. Pay attention to your body. Don't overdo it. Be patient. Be reasonable with yourself. And use tools that can help you not overdo it. And that can help you not overdo it and also pace you to push yourself when you're feeling lazy. And one of those is that 3-hour rule. And in addition to that 3-hour rule, within that 3-hour rule, you can break up how you practice with a 25-minute timer and take 5-minute breaks every 25 minutes. Get up, walk around, hydrate, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. Because you're not an art cipher, you are a human being. And art is inherently a sedentary activity. You're going to need to get up to loosen up and walk around and get your blood flowing. And your drawings will improve from doing that, by the way, because you'll be getting more oxygen to your brain from loosening up your body instead of sitting on your butt the whole day. Touch yourself. Said Twitch chat. Self-massage. So I'm kind of going on autopilot now because I'm talking over this stuff. But in order to really learn this, I really do have to... You can go on autopilot when you do these, and it does kind of help you with muscle memory, but if you really want to absorb it, you have to pay attention to what you're doing and why. So I'm thinking about this again. And talking through what you're doing, like I'm doing now with your friends. If you're doing a demo for your friends, like kind of like what I'm doing right now, is also a great way to learn. Because it forces you to talk through what you're doing and make decisions that you kind of have to think about out loud. What are your favorite sources to reference for posture? What do you mean by that? Do you mean pose, or do you mean like how I'm sitting when I draw? So you can talk about that, like good, correct posture when you're sitting and drawing is good. Razor Droid, what did you mean by posture? For drawing postures, but you're still being ambiguous. Oh, okay. For drawing poses. Well, I mean, like, Russian Figure Academy is one. Old Masters, some of the Pre-Raphaelites. The Pre-Raphaelites are a 1800s art movement that was trying to, like, get back to classical drawing themes, kind of. And a lot of their work is, I mean, they were trying to, like, why don't I bring them up actually? Because they're kind of fascinating. So the Pre-Raphaelites are around the 1800s. They were a movement of musicians, painters, poets, authors who tried to get to like it was kind of a medieval classical kind of thing. They were trying to do like a throwback to like classical themes and stuff, but these are very, very modern paintings. Like they're very modern fantasy paintings. And a lot of them are heavily influenced by photography. I mean, this looks like it was a photo reference. Some of these look like straight up like photographs that were taken in looked like they were the kind of staging you'd see in photographs from the 1800s, or like stage and theater productions from the 1800s. Yeah, they're excellent. Their hands in particular. If you want to study hands, especially really beautiful feminine hands, and also women's faces. They have very modern women's faces in a lot of their work, because of course they were referencing photos, and there was a very contemporary amount of sophistication and thought that went into depicting women's expressions on these. Like the artists and the models usually had very professional relationships around this time, so you can kind of see that kind of reflected in how some of the figures were drawn. Yeah, it's very, very modern. I mean, some of these look like they could be made today. They basically kind of almost were. I mean, 1800s isn't that long ago. Oh. I think is that a photograph? Yeah, that's a photograph. Photograph of somebody trying to mimic Pre-Raphaelite looks in. Yeah, Pre-Raphaelites are fantastic. Let's look at J.C. Becker. He's one of my favorites. I'm going to be studying a bunch from him. Oops. J.C. Leyendecker, the early 20th century illustrator. His forms he's excellent to study from because he very, very heavily stylizes his forms. Like, it looks like exquisitely designed, like really expensive rich person cakes almost. Like a master cake froster made these kind of. I love them. I want to eat them up. Like this is design. I mean, like you can really, really look at this. This is what they're talking about when they talk about design in painting and drawing. This is really stylized, and it's all based on like classical drawing knowledge. He's having fun with it. Like, look at that. This is what they're talking about when they say gesture. When Steve Houston was talking about like combining gesture with structure. If you really look at it, these are like really simple shapes, but there's an understanding there. It gets really subtle. That's really simple going on there, but then he like adds a little bit of tone, and they're in kind of, you can see the underplane of the arm going through there, and then he has like in terms of like design, there's like a lot of simplicity and complexity, and this is a fantastic example of that because look at that. Look at that. He didn't even paint the man's outfit here for this particular illustration. Well, I think this might be a cutout from an existing work, but it's but this is an excellent example of like we just see the gloves and stuff. I actually don't know the full context for this cover here. Come to think of it, this might be a cutout of an existing work. Oh wait, here it is. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, this is the painting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like like his outfit is completely in black. It's invisible and not painted. If you talk there's good design uses a mix of simplicity and complexity. So you have very simple areas. This is about as simple as you can get, not including that background area, but we see enough of things to kind of fill in the gaps with our mind about what's going on here. And he has enough understanding of where to place the hand to have it make sense, so that in our heads we read. Like, it's so clever. It's like visual tricks like these are so clever, where people who aren't even master draftsmen who look at this still fill in the gaps on the stuff that he didn't include, just because we intuitively understand what a human figure is, even if we can't draw it like he can. And in case you think he was leaving that out to cheat, look at how complex this stuff is. Simplicity, complexity, contrast, and design right there. So beautiful. I love that painting so much. And more of that here. He did more with that theme. His particular coloring style is always really fascinating too. How he like leaves those little gaps in there, or he will work them up like that. Yeah, I've seen some of his paintings up close. A lot of them are gigantic, by the way. Like, he worked them on huge fucking canvases, and he did lots and lots of prep work for his paintings. You'd see like, oh, here we go. Here's a good example. And this isn't even all the prep work he would do, but he'd like do these, and then he'd like put them on a grid like that, and then he'd like make a grid on a larger canvas, and then you can see him doing the studies here, like he's working out like, oh, that's the flat basic design of this thing right here, because he needs to understand what design patterns are going to go into this when he draws it on the character's hips. He did little sketches here and there, trying to work out like angles of the thumb. He was encountering different problems and things that he might need to go over. Different takes on the face. So when you do work, you're going to be doing a lot of stuff like this, especially for the concept design class. There's a little bit more of that going on here. Yep, you can see him working out different hand positions and stuff, trying out different things. You can see his sketching down there. I actually want to see if I can find more of his stuff like this and compile it to show off like how he thinks through stuff. So it's cool to see the thought process. Like his final works are so manicured. It's nice to see how he actually thinks these through. Let's look at Alex Ross now. Ross, who is often called the Norman Rockwell. And we'll also look at Norman Rockwell, actually, because Norman Rockwell was kind of one of Leindecker's contemporaries, one of his peers. Rockwell did make extensive use of photo reference, and he often shot his neighbors or his family members and stuff. Of course, he pushed the acting in them a lot further than what he got in the photos too. Like you could, there's a even in like in this, there's a tremendous amount of stylization. Even the hair and stuff right here, like the whole angle of the body here is like very slightly pushed and stuff. Yeah, Norman Rockwell is another one to go through for sure. It's like I don't, and by no means don't limit it till early 20th century illustrators like him that have very clear figures are excellent to study from, but like I wouldn't by no means limit it to people like him, because the sky's the limit on finding good people to draw from. Unfortunately, some of the ones that I would recommend on that are kind of non-work safe, so like a lot of art nudes and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, here's Alex Ross. Alex Ross also makes extensive use of photo reference that he shoots himself, of course, just like Norman Rockwell and those classic illustrators. And you all should get in the habit of shooting your own photo reference for your own things, for everything you do. Yourself, your family members, get used to like staging things, almost kind of like a little mini movie set for yourself. And that's what Reference Club will be partly about. Not just grabbing photo reference, but shooting your own reference. And we'll be meeting our first meeting on tomorrow on Tuesday, 10 a.m. Yeah, there's a lot of really clear figures in these, in a lot of his work. Clarity is a big thing with Alex Ross, so doing draw-over studies with him is an excellent idea. Ah, check it out. Look, I was just thinking, there's actually multiple... Ah, there we go. This is an homage to J.C. Leyendecker. This illustration by Alex Ross is an homage to that J.C. Leyendecker picture we saw. He's got a few more J.C. Leyendecker homages that he's done. Yeah, it's literally the same theme. And like similar pose. Harley Quinn, of course, is like got her body turned around against Joker there instead of the Leyendecker one. But yeah, I mean, like I think in the Alex Ross art book there was a, which I have it right here actually. I think he actually did show the painting, the Leyendecker painting next to it. So what's cool about like learning to draw like these people? Here, let me. Is if you learn a lot from them about their approach to drawing. Like this is also by Alex Ross right here, trying out the Bruce Timm style. See? I think this one actually is by Bruce Timm right here. Yeah, that one is by Bruce Timm. This is more Alex Ross right here. I think that is anyway. Yeah, it says check out some work by Alex Ross. That's cool. Oops, get away from that. But yeah, Alex Ross like did like a bunch like in the DC mythology Alex Ross art book. They have a story behind this where Alex Ross impressed Bruce Timm by trying out drawing Superman in Bruce Timm style. And of course, Alex Ross is a amazing draftsman, so he's able to like break stuff down into cartoon character stuff really easily. It's like those like it's deceptive. Like a lot of people get caught up in cartooning a lot, but you can cartoon way more effectively if you have a foundation and tradition and draftsmanship. You don't necessarily have to master things as to the level that someone like Alex Ross has, but if you can get off like if you can digest enough of it to make a career out of it, fantastic. And then you can keep going with it, of course. I do like how there is like a sequel to that other Joker painting he did, that Batman steps in between the couple. That's cool. Actually, I haven't read that book. It's the Marvel version of his. There's a DC book of his art, and that I have, and then there's a Marvel one. And of course, there's lots of more recent artists that, in some ways, have kind of surpassed Alex Ross that are worth looking at. But I can't remember them at the moment, although I have seen some of them. Some of them I think have actually worked on the Marvel and DC superhero films too. Some of the artists that I'm thinking of that I actually want to dig more into. But yeah. Cool. We're going to end it here, very shortly. I'm just going to go over the homework. The next figure drawing class will be more focused on like continuity from what we taught this morning, and probably doing some more advanced stuff with longer poses. The 2:30 class is going to generally assume that almost everyone there is not beginners, but people who are in the morning class can feel free to step in too. So we will. I'll issue the homework real quick again. And then we will end the stream here, and we'll of course resume stream again, or we might not if we're doing like art nudes or something, or I don't know. Well, we'll figure that out. And we'll resume at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. So the homework is 3 things. 1 to 3 pages of photo reference drawers of figures. 1 to 3 pages of figure drawing studies that are either from observation of real world figures or photos or video reference. 1 to 3 pages of combination drawovers and copy studies of existing art from good draftsmen, like some of the ones that we just went over, like Alex Ross, and so on. Classical illustrators, old masters. Those Pre-Raphaelites that we looked over from the 1800s. So the idea behind this homework is it's pretext for something to do. You should probably try to go above and beyond what I've listed here, but just having this to aim for will give you some pretext of something to do this week. And generally speaking, you should be trying to get a little bit of drawing every day, and every little bit of figure drawing every day in that you can, and ideally every day. So with that, I'm going to start wrapping it up, but I will maybe put on a video. I'm kind of in an Alex Ross vibe, so. Let's maybe see if I can find a video related to him to play on stream. Oh, here we go. There's a 2-minute video of Alex Ross talking about. He actually has a YouTube channel, an official YouTube channel, and he talks about painting and comics and other things like that. I actually realized now I probably should not play his videos on my stream. I've forgotten that I'm streaming to Twitch. But if you want it, I mean, just go to his YouTube channel. It's Alex Ross, Why Use Photo References, and you can check that out. So anyway.
Congratulations! 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 Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations!
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Thank you all.
Anyway, thanks for coming. If you like what we're doing, feel free to, if you are able to, donate or send me a Twitch Prime subscription for my efforts here. And there's donation links for PayPal on my Twitch channel and also in the Discord under the Classroom tip jar in the lobby section. Other people who stream here and other people who stream guest lectures and stream their own classes and stuff on through Ethan's Discord or run workshops will also be posting their own tip jars and stuff if you ever want to donate to them as well. Anyway, so we're going to cut it here. We will resume at 2:30 p.m., which will be in an hour and a half from now, and we'll resume figure drawing stuff. Anyway, thank you for coming.